finally, it happened. We all knew it was coming eventually. It had to. The Los Angeles Chargers fired head coach Brandon Staley, and they fired general manager Tom Telesco. And this was a move everybody expected to happen, whether that was at the end of the season or after a tough loss. And boy, did they have a tough loss on Thursday night. These firings came the morning after LA lost 63-21 to the Las Vegas Raiders. Now that score looks bad, but I can assure you that it was actually much, much worse than the score says. The Raiders ended up leading this game 63-7. If it wasn't for two late Chargers touchdowns, the score would look even worse, but this game wasn't even close. This game was hard to watch. The Raiders were up 42-0 at the half. A lot of people expected this to be a close game. Remember, the Raiders have an interim head coach, Antonio Pierce. They are not by any means a great football team. They're starting a rookie quarterback in Aiden O'Connell. They already fired Josh McDaniels this year. They're not great, and it didn't matter. They absolutely crushed the Chargers from start to finish. That graphic of it being 42-0 at halftime is absolutely insane. That is 3 points shy of the NFL record that was set back in 2009 when the New England Patriots led the Tennessee Titans 45-0 at half. It was the largest halftime deficit in Chargers history, and it's the most points allowed by the Chargers in a single game, who had given up 57 points to the then St. Louis Rams back in 2000. That doesn't say enough to just how bad this game was, because to put the cherry on top, if you remember in week 14, the Raiders lost to the Minnesota Vikings. They lost 3-0. They did not score against the Vikings. They only gave up 3 points on defense and still lost. Fast forward 1 week, and they put up 63 on the Chargers. Now, there are some excuses that are going to get thrown out, and some of them are very fair. Keenan Allen did not play. He's your best wide receiver you at least have had this season. And then, of course, when you look further in the roster, Justin Herbert and Mike Williams are both on injured reserve. Williams has been out since the beginning of the season. Herbert, of course, just had that surgery on his index finger. The Chargers are a complete mess from start to finish, and at some point, something had to change. And while injuries aren't his fault, there is no doubt that the Chargers have underperformed under Brandon Staley. But first, thank you to DraftKings for sponsoring today's video. We have a huge one this weekend. Live from Las Vegas, Leon Edwards is going to be in the octagon defending his welterweight title against Colby Covington. Have you built your bet slip yet? Well, we've partnered with DraftKings, and they're helping us out with an incredible offer ahead of the fights. All new customers that bet $5 will get $150 back in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now, and don't forget to use our code JDPROD. That's right, new customers, just $5 on any wager and get $150 in bonus bets. Stay in on the action and use those $150 in bonus bets on same game parlays, where you can combine multiple bets for an even bigger payout. As far as fighting goes, you can bet on the number of rounds and the method of victory. If you're already signed up for DraftKings, no problem. All customers can get a no-sweat same-game parlay or same-game parlay X. Get a bonus bet back if your bet doesn't hit. Max reward limits do apply. So what are you waiting for? Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use our code JDPROD, bet $5 on any wager, and get $150 in bonus bets back instantly. That's promo code JDPROD only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Thank you again to DraftKings, and let's get right back to the video. In all, Brandon Staley ended up finishing his time as the Chargers head coach at 24-24. So perfectly mid, 500. Wasn't horrible, I guess, but he wasn't great. He was touted as this analytical head coach. Everybody was super excited for him. And for whatever reason, it just never worked. He always made the wrong decisions at the wrong time. He never knew what he was doing, it felt like, especially when it came to clock management or when to make a big decision. Should I punt here? Should I kick a field goal here? Should I call a timeout here? He was one of the worst head coaches at that over his tenure in LA. And the final 3 games of each of his 3 seasons are absolutely nuts. In 2021, his first year in LA, the Chargers ended up finishing 9-8. They finished 3rd in the AFC East. Well, in the final game of the year, week 18, they needed to win or tie against the Raiders and they'd make the playoffs. Brandon Staley just made some baffling decisions. The Chargers failed a 4th down conversion on their own 18-yard line. That led to just even more points for the Raiders. That makes no sense whatsoever. Why are you going for it on 4th down from your own 18? And then, of course, the biggest one. They called a timeout with 38 seconds remaining in overtime that led to a Raiders 47-yard field goal as time expired. It really seemed like the Raiders were just going to let the clock run out because if they tied, the Raiders also would have made the playoffs. Instead, it ended up being the Raiders and the Steelers because the Chargers ended up losing the game. That was a very weird situation. Staley got some heat for it, but it was nothing compared to the next 2. 2022, Chargers looked pretty solid. They went 10-7. They finished 2nd in the AFC West, and they played the Jacksonville Jaguars in the wild card round. Now, the Jags were the 4 seeds, so the game was in Jacksonville, but the Chargers had the better record. Of course, when you're in the same division as the Chiefs, that always makes life a little bit harder, but the Chargers had a good season. And then they went up on the Jaguars, 27-0. They were up 27-0 in the wild card round. Trevor Lawrence had thrown a couple picks. This game was over until it wasn't. The Jags came back, hit a game-winning field goal as time expired to win 31-30. Since then, you knew the time was ticking for Brandon Staley. After losing a game where you were up 27, it feels like there is no way to turn that back around. We all saw how the Falcons just completely fell apart after that 28-3 blown lead in the Super Bowl against the Patriots. Now Dan Quinn's off in Dallas doing his own thing. Of course, Kyle Shanahan ended up leaving. Julio Jones ended up going. The whole Matt Ryan situation. It rips apart a team, and I think everybody knew that this was going to go south if Brandon Staley could not at least win a playoff game this year. And not only did they not win a playoff game, they just weren't good. They ended up going 5-9 under Brandon Staley this year. And of course, his final game of the season as the head coach, a 63-21 loss to the Raiders. There's been a lot of scrutiny around Brandon Staley. Of course, you had people asking if he was going to continue to call defensive plays. He made it very clear he would. He won't be anymore because he's gone. It makes you really look back and look at the rise of Brandon Staley because he had a really fast rise to becoming an NFL head coach. He was the Rams defensive coordinator, and yes, he had a lot of success, but it was one season in 2020. That was it. Before that, he had just been an outside linebackers coach in the league for the Broncos and then the Bears for in total 3 years. That was his entire experience in the pros before he became an NFL head coach. That is just crazy. It's not like there was a ton of experience, especially when it comes to the pro level for Brandon Staley, but people were just so enamored and interested by him that he still got that job. And you know what? Maybe he shouldn't have, because clearly it didn't work out. Now, Tom Telesco was hired in 2013. The Chargers in all went 84-92 with Telesco as the GM. He made the playoffs 3 times in total. He never made it past the divisional round. They won 2 playoff games. They beat the Bengals in the wild card round in 2013, and then they beat the Ravens in 2018. Telesco, when he first got to LA, ended up starting with head coach Mike McCoy. Now, he only lasted 4 seasons, and then he was fired after going 27-37 overall. You'll see that 4 really has been the magic number with Telesco. When the Chargers made that transition from San Diego to Los Angeles, they hired Anthony Lynn, and that didn't go well either. He was fired after 4 seasons after going 33-30 overall. Finally, the Chargers hired Brandon Staley. He went 24-24 overall, also lasted 4 seasons, although no, it was not a full 4 seasons. Now, when you look at the Chargers, you have to wonder how appealing is this job, both as a head coach and a general manager. And I know a lot of people think that it's going to be a good job, and I disagree. The Chargers have a franchise quarterback, Justin Herbert. That alone is going to draw people to want to come there, right? That's the only positive when you look at it. I mean, you're talking about the Chargers, a team that doesn't have a ton of fan support, at least compared to the rest of the league. And then you look at the ins and outs of this team, and it's a disaster. They're projected to be $45 million over the cap in 2024. That's insane. They have 4 players taking up over 13% of the cap each. Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, Keenan Allen, and Mike Williams. The Chargers are going to have a very, very tough decision to make soon, depending on who that head coach or GM is. They're going to probably have to let go at least 2 of those guys, maybe even 3 or all of them. It doesn't help that the Chargers just really have a weak roster, and a lot of that is because of just bad decisions. They've made the wrong calls. They missed at the draft on Quentin Johnston at 21, right before Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison went off the board. Then you look at their free agency decisions, like when they signed J.C. Jackson to a 5-year, $82.5 million contract in 2022. He was bad and was traded this season to the Patriots for a late pick swap. That's all. Now, the Chargers are currently projected to have the 5th overall pick at the 2024 NFL Draft. Obviously, they're not going after a quarterback. There's no way Marvin Harrison Jr. ends up there, but they're going to have some other good options. You could see Malik Neighbors if they want to go after a wide receiver, Brock Bowers, and of course, they're going to have some offensive line options as well. They really need to hit on that draft pick, and they also need to hit in free agency. Ultimately, though, I think the biggest deterrent from a head coach wanting to come here and even a GM is Dean Spanos, man. He is a disaster. Still the owner of the Chargers, and you know what? He wasted Phillip Rivers, and as we can see here, it really just feels like Justin Herbert is gonna have the same fate. I don't know who it's gonna be. I don't even have a good guess, but the new head coach and general manager are going to have a very, very tough job.